Okay, we are live. I think everything's on. Everything's on. I think we're good to go. Okay, so I do have a quote that I just saw from Instagram, and I want to know what you guys think. He's a very famous pastor, and this is what he said: God not only understands the coronavirus, he has purposes for it. God does nothing and permits nothing without wise purposes. Nothing just happens. Agree? Disagree?
I really disagree.
Okay?
More than just because to me this reminds me of the saying everything happens for a reason.
Okay?
I definitely disagree with that.
I think he would say, yes, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Why do you disagree with that?
Well, let me first start off by saying I think God is able to create goodness out of any atrocity, but that doesn't mean that because He's able to fix something, He's gonna go and break it. And the example I use is a very extreme example of like there's no good purpose in someone getting molested or harassed, like rape. Like, I can't think of any good reason for that. It was just because of one person's will uh, overcoming someone else's will. But I think God is still able to like with that rape victim, if they meet Christ and they have a good relationship with, I still think it's very possible, and God would probably want them to be able to trust a man in the future and have a very healthy relationship.
Okay. So, okay, good. But I want to ask you one more time. Why do you disagree with him?
Okay, yeah, because I can't see anything good in someone being raped. I don't see the.
But just because you can't see it,
Uh-huh.
so okay, so if I follow your logic, is it possible then whatever you cannot fathom, it's not possible?
No.
So if you cannot understand something about God, how God operates, does that mean that that's not true of God?
Definitely not.
Okay, so then why do you disagree with him? I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Okay. Any thoughts that you guys have?
So for me, the first two lines
Okay.
of what he says is kind of like coming from his understanding of God that is appearing in the second part of what he says here. So he's saying God does nothing, permits nothing, that like nothing just happen.
Right.
I think basically my understanding of what God does in the Bible is different.
Okay.
That I think he's purely coming from the idea that God is controlling everything.
Okay.
God is in control of everything.
And you disagree with that?
And I disagree with that.
Okay. You think biblically the Bible does not say that?
Right.
I'm gonna prove you wrong. Okay. Nicole? I will prove you wrong. Yeah, so in short, he's basically saying God willed coronavirus. This is just part of this is part of his plan. Why? Why do you disagree with that? What do you mean? Tell us more.
That's kind of what Emily said.
No, what?
I think like that deterministic kind of view of that God controls everything.
Okay.
That's not right.
What do you mean that's not right? Why can't that be right? So you're saying this kind of idea does not appear in the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm going to prove you wrong too. Ready?
You guys did the same thing.
Can I add something, or do you just want?
No, I just want to
Okay.
go. Well, you already listened to this, so I don't remember what you're talking about.
Explain.
Yeah, why don't you explain? Yeah.
Because God doesn't like everything that happens in this world.
Okay. Everything that happens.
Yeah, it's not like God wants those unfortunate things to happen, but because there's.
How do you know? How do you know that?
How do I know that?
Yeah. How do you know? What if God wants these things to happen?
No, because then why would He be feeling certain ways in the Bible?
For example.
Like when he, like at the temple when he was angry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe he did that to show them that he's not happy about. He wanted to show his glory, God's glory through that. So he planned all of it.
No.
Why? Why is that not
Because
possible?
if he planned all of it, then why would he be upset about it?
Okay, I'm gonna show you that. I'm gonna show you this perspective from the Bible, using the Bible. All right. All right. All right. So this is a classical discussion. It seems like you three biblical ignorant people are free will. Okay, because you cannot fathom God being deterministic, but we clearly see from the Bible that God is very, very deterministic. Actually,
Well, you'll show us.
I'm going to show you that at least. I'm going to show you that John Piper is not an unreasonable man. Okay? He actually knows the Bible probably better than all four of us combined in here. And yet, he still believes this. Okay? So I'm going to show you why, what his view is what we call determinism, why he believes that, and how you guys are going to actually react to that. Or maybe you need to submit to it, not react to it, but submit to it. Just because you're not happy about it, that doesn't make it true or not true. All right, so what is determinism? Let's go over it really quickly. Determinism is this idea that God is in control of every single decision. So even though you might think right now that you have free will, that you're here, sitting here in this room, because you have chosen to come here, or that people online listening to this have chosen to watch this through the screen. No. Everything actually was planned by God. So there is no will outside of God.
So does that mean God willed a lot of people to go to hell?
Absolutely.
So then, do they believe that there is no human choice?
No human choice whatsoever. No, there is no will.
That's the same, almost same as predestination.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This is, and predestination comes from this view, determinism. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the purpose of of giving a speech? Like preach.
Giving us what?
Preach. Like what's the purpose of preaching?
What's the purpose of preaching?
Evangelism. For them.
Maybe that's God's way of making us grow.
People who are already programmed.
Yes.
To
Maybe that's his way of programming the computers.
who are supposed to.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. So if you look here, some of you guys say, no, what are you talking about? I have free will. I'm here, I'm thinking, and I disagree with this, all of these things. But again, it's just an illusion of free will. Okay? You think that you're making choices right now.
Wow.
Okay? But
Dang.
you see, it's just an illusion of choice. You think you have decisions, but in the end, there's only one way out. All right? So I'm going to give you guys Bible very biblical reasons why you should believe in determinism, or what determinists say about how they use the Bible to say that it comes from there. Okay, again, I want you guys to know these are not unbiblical people. These are not random people. Okay, these are actually people. Actually, the funny thing is, determinists would look at you guys and say you guys are the one that's being unbiblical, because none of you guys actually used biblical arguments at all. Okay, but I'm gonna give you biblical arguments for determinism. All right. So as you guys know the story of Joseph. We're gonna skip through all of this very, very quickly. So what's going on over here? What do we know about Joseph? Who's Joseph's dad? Who's Joseph's dad? Jacob. Okay. And Jacob had how many sons? 12 sons. And then Joseph was the 11th. Okay. And Jacob liked him the most. Okay. And he gave him because of the wife, yeah. Because of the mom. He liked, okay. All right. So anyways, so what happens? He gives him colored robe. Okay. So not a good way to parent, obviously. So, do you guys know what kind of jobs they had? The brothers had? They were all shepherds. And so they would actually go roaming around, because the sheep, they actually eat a lot of grass. They can't just stay in one place. So they would go far away. So that day, Jacob's internet was not working. And so he kept sending the messages, but they wouldn't send back. So he sends Joseph to check up on his brothers. Okay. So he makes a journey up here. They're from Hebron, right here. And then he goes all the way up to Shechem. So this is like 4 or 5 days trip. So it wasn't an easy thing. But when he went to Shechem, the shepherds there told him, oh, the brothers actually went to Dothan. So he actually goes to Dothan. Okay? Long story short, what happens? Okay, they sell him off because they're all jealous of him and they don't like him. Okay? And they decide to sell him off to Egypt. Or they sell him off to the slave traders, and then he gets sent off to Egypt. Okay, and then he gets sold to Potiphar's house, also known as Magid. Once he gets there, what happens? He's one of the best workers, so Potiphar puts him as yes. Okay, he becomes basically like the head steward, head slave. But what happens?
Potiphar's wife.
Okay, Potiphar's very creepy looking wife. Okay, seduces him, but he says no, 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 no. And then so she goes off to Potiphar and said he tried to do bad things to me, and so Potiphar sends him to jail. Once he's there, again, he's such a good prisoner, so he becomes
In charge of the other prisoners.
good. He becomes in charge of all the prisoners, and he takes care of them. He sees, when he wakes up one morning, he sees 2 former slaves of the king, or workers of the king, and they both seem very, very sad. Long story short, they both had a dream, and then Joseph interprets the dream for them. One of them, he says, is going to die, and one of them is actually going to find king's favor and be restored. And Joseph asks him, please remember me, okay, and tell the king about me, because I am a Hebrew sold by my brother, and I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm here in the prison. But what happens? He forgets. How many years passes? Do you remember, honey? I think like 10 year passes or something like that. I forgot. No, not 10 years. Okay, years pass. Pharaoh has a dream. And then now this guy who was formerly in the prison, he remembers, oh, I remember a guy who interpreted my dream. So they get Joseph. Joseph, who just finished Insanity Max.
Been thinking for those 10 years.
Okay, with his new six-pack abs. Interprets the dream. The Pharaoh is very happy with the dream. And actually, Joseph also gives him a plan how to survive the famine. And then King says, well, there's no one else but you who could probably carry out this plan. We go back to Jacob and his brothers. They're also in famine as well, and they run out of food. And they hear that in Egypt, there's food there. So go and get food. Long story short, okay, what happens? Joseph and his brothers, they reconcile. Okay, Joseph forgives them. And Jacob gets to see Joseph once again, and they move to Egypt, and happy ending, right? Not so fast. Jacob, the dad, dies. Okay? So what happens to the brothers? Well, and that's where we're going to pick up. If you have your phones,
Scared, right?
yeah. If you guys have your phones with you, whoever is there first, please read it for us.
15 through 21, Genesis 50, God's good purposes. This is the ESV version. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, maybe that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them.
Okay. So the brothers get very, very sad, or they get very, very scared because they said, oh shoot, what if he was only nice to us because our dad was alive? But now that our dad is gone, Joseph is gonna take revenge on us. Okay, what do I do? So they come and they actually say, oh, actually, you know what? Dad actually said forgive, for you to forgive us before he died. Okay? And Joseph says this is very important. What does it say in verse 20? He says, hey. Or 19, he says, am I in the place of God? You planned. Mine says planned. What does yours say? Intended. Okay, you intended. Or what does yours say? Does yours say intended as well? Okay, you meant. Okay, all of these words, okay? You wanted these things to happen to me, but God, what? Intended, meant, planned, it for good. To bring about the present situation. What? The survival of many people. So, what is he saying? He's saying, dude, you think why would I blame you? Okay, this whole situation, we didn't understand it, but this was God's plan. He wanted to save the Israelites because we're a chosen nation. So, he caused you to sell me off so that I can come here, be a slave, be able to interpret Potiphar's dream, and then look at us now. Now we can survive. You see, all those bad things happen, but God purposed them. Determinism. This is what another famous pastor. Actually, he was one of my favorites, but now he's my second favorite now. Francis Chan. talking about Joseph, he said this: Joseph looked at things differently because he knew who was ultimately in control. God's in control. This isn't about you. If anyone's guilty, it will be the father, not the brothers. God is guilty. The father decided this. The father wanted this. This was part of the father's plan. Now, I don't know why bad things happen to me, but it's all in God's bigger plan. You think things happen by accident? It's part of God's bigger plan. So if someone cuts me off, God's trying to teach me something. Someone drives 20 miles per hour, God's teaching me patience. It's not them who's doing it to you. God has a bigger plan. So again, essentially, he's saying the same thing as John Piper. Okay, I think Francis Chan, I don't want to misquote him, but I believe he would say the same thing as John Piper. He would say, if anyone's guilty of coronavirus, it's God. God wanted this. God planned this. God willed it. Are you convinced? Okay. I'm going to give you one more. Okay? Because you guys apparently don't like the Bible and getting your information from the Bible, apparently. So I'm going to give you one more. One perspective. Okay. A couple 100 years pass. Okay. The Israelites have grown bigger and bigger and bigger. But they're slaves now in Egypt. There comes a hero named Moses. And God says Moses and to Pharaoh and says, hey, it's time to come out now. And this is what God actually says about the whole situation. Let's go to Exodus now, this time. If you could read for us, Nikhil.
Exodus chapter 7, 1 through 5. I'm reading from NIV.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt with mighty acts of judgment, and I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it.
Okay. So God says, go. But just letting you know, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. He's not going to listen to you, so what am I going to do? I'm going to stretch out my hand, and I'm going to do a judgment upon them. So, again, God's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. So Pharaoh will have no choice. He's going to have no choice but to not listen to you, harden his heart, and that's why I'm going to hit him. This is God's plan. Again, God can harden his heart, man's heart, for his glory. And actually, Paul draws it out very, very well in Romans chapter 9. And we're not going to go there, but he basically says this. He quotes from Exodus saying, God can do whatever he wants. If it's for God's glory, why not?
But that goes against the definition of love. The Bible says love does not seek itself. Here it sounds like God is seeking his glory. That's biblical.
But maybe you just don't know how it could be unselfish. Maybe you're not fathoming that. Maybe you just don't understand it.
Then on both ends, you can say that to anything, and then you can't really love or trust anything you can't understand. I can say that about
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Like I could say, oh, well then I don't understand anything about God.
No, that's not true. Because there are things that he revealed to us. So we're not saying. So what we're not saying is anti-intellectualism or you just accept everything, like you just have zero knowledge at all, right? Because there are things that a determinist would say. There are things that God revealed to us, but there's also things that we as a human being, we just cannot understand, and things that God necessarily doesn't explain to us. But we see in the case of both both the Pharaoh and Joseph, if you ask them during that time if God is God of love, they would have said, no, absolutely not. I don't understand how this could be it. And yet, by the end of their life, they understand. So in some sense, and that's what I'm trying to say by that. I'm trying to say maybe we don't, at that moment, we don't see that as a God of love, but maybe if we look back later, even after we die, we look back, we see, oh, yeah, bigger purpose to it. Yeah, that's what determinists would say. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, they would say we can't determine this can't be God's love just because we don't understand the situation. Maybe we just don't understand it right now, and perhaps God does have a bigger plan.
But that statement right there,
Hmm.
that's not like a single instance.
Yeah, this
It's
is
like forever.
this is throughout the Bible.
No, the fact that for His glory,
Mhm.
that's not like you're not saying like He only did it this part, just this instant He did it for His glory. You're saying that God can do this all the time.
Yes, that's what determinists would say. His glory is him revealing his glory is very, very important.
So then would this solve the great controversy?
Yes, absolutely.
God is,
Absolute. No. If this is true,
uh-huh.
even great controversy, it wouldn't exist. It's not really a great controversy.
Yeah.
Because what's a great controversy?
Yeah.
If God
He says He's doing what He wants.
Yeah. Exactly. Or maybe his like method of how he planned it is a great controversy, but there isn't really a great controversy because the whole great controversy is all about revealing his character to his creation. But you don't really, I mean, you already have everything planned out. So
What's interesting is the next chapter,
okay,
Exodus,
okay,
chapter 8,
okay,
the same part, but this time in 32 it says, but Pharaoh hardened his heart this time.
okay.
It's interesting there.
But that's only because God hardened his heart. Because it says in 7, God, I will harden it.
Yeah.
So if it said maybe like Pharaoh hardened his heart first, and then God says, I hardened his heart, maybe maybe. But this, clearly, God actually says, I will harden his heart. Biblical.
So then about the great controversy,
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted to vindicate his character.
Mm-hmm. But he doesn't need to vindicate anything
Right.
because he controls everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So then why didn't he soften Satan's heart at that time?
I mean, so that's what I'm trying to tell you is if this is true, then there is no great controversy.
Yeah, and then maybe it's the fact that we even have our own choices.
Yeah, there is no free will. Yeah, that's what, again, determinism is that the only person who has a will is God. But again, that's exactly what's being shown in these two Bible studies. Joseph clearly says this was planned by God. This was exactly, we are just a puppet. We did exactly, I could forgive you because we did exactly, you guys only did what God planned.
But how does he know that was God's plan? How does he know for sure?
Okay,
Because
so,
God didn't.
okay, good. So perhaps Joseph is wrong then.
writer of the Bible.
Or the writer of the Bible is wrong. Fine, I'll give you that. Then how about this? Where God actually says, I will harden his heart. Okay. So good. So this is a type of dialogue that free will versus determinists would have. But again, you guys are not giving me biblical arguments yet. Okay? So which is fine, okay? Or which is not okay. Because that's which is actually not okay. But I'm going to give you biblical arguments. But this is very, very important again because a lot of determinists actually say to free will, people who believe in free will or indeterminists, they say that's fine. Okay, all of these arguments, your philosophical arguments you're making against, like God can't be a loving God if He chooses everybody and or some people to go to hell. It makes sense in our logic, but still, that's not what the Bible says. Okay, so if it's your logic against the Bible, I'm going to go with the Bible. Because I'm going to say whatever God says about himself, not about what you think about God, who God should be. Okay? And again, that's not a good hermeneutic. That's not a very good way to view who God is, right? If I just say, well, I want to believe whatever I want to believe about God. I believe God is loving, so he shouldn't do this, and he should. That doesn't work. Does that make sense? You're just creating your own image of a God, right? So we have to, if we're going to say anything about this, okay, then we have to use, again, the Bible. Very important, okay? But it's because a lot of people with free will, they use philosophical arguments. Even though it's powerful, me too, I don't understand how God can be a loving God. But again, if God says he's a loving God and he's deterministic, then I have to believe that. Okay? But let me tell you why I believe the Bible actually gives an argument for free will. Okay? I'm gonna put one sentence here, and Nicole, this is what we talked about in the Bible study. I just wanted you to say it instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, I heard it in a Bible study." Yeah. I want you to be able to describe it. Yeah, because you might have like your friends or others, right? And so you have to explain it. All right, so I'm gonna make an argument that God does not always get what he wants. Okay? The Bible shows that God does not always get what he wants. Therefore, if that's the case, okay, then that means that God's not determining everything. Because if God is determining everything, then he should get whatever he wants. That makes sense, right? Now, again, that's not just a philosophical argument. I'm going to actually give you examples from the Bible. Okay. I'm going to give you a couple of them, and we're going to go over it quickly. Okay, Mark chapter 6. Here's an example. Oh, you guys want to read it all together? Okay, let's do it. How about you? First one, second one, third one, and then we'll just skip 4. Because I'm gonna give you a longer argument as well.
So Mark chapter 6, NIV version,
Mm-hmm.
1 through 6.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples.
Okay.
When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue,
Hmm.
and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? Isn't this a carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor, except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. He could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them.
Okay. So what does it say? Jesus goes back to his hometown, and basically he gets rejected. They're saying, "What? We know this guy. How is he gonna say he's the Messiah? We know you, dude. We know all your brothers, your sisters." So how do we actually see how does this verse actually show us that God is actually he did?
They wouldn't question him.
No, not that. No. There's something that he can't do.
obviously Jesus went there and wanted to be accepted,
Okay.
but they were rejecting him.
No, that's not it. Okay, look at verse 5, look at verse 6. Wait, why can't he do miracles? It tells you. Because they didn't believe. Right? Okay, because of their lack of faith. Okay, so again, God wants to heal them. God wants to make people better. But again, he can't. Why? Because they don't believe in him. Again, if God wanted to do whatever he wants to do, if he wants to heal them, he can heal them. But why is it that, and you see a lot of other cases, right? He says, it's your faith that has healed you. Okay, so it's not just unilateral meaning one way, like, hey, I'm going to heal you, that's it. No, faith is a requirement in healing.
So there's never been a moment where Jesus performed a miracle while the person didn't believe?
It seems like it.
What about when like Lazarus was dead?
Hmm.
If he's kind of dead, he's not really believing. He just
Sure. Right. But that I mean, he's dead, so he can't have faith either. Right, so that was a unilateral move.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying so that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying every single case has to be bilateral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay? Second one. By the way, this is just to give you context. Jesus is as he's looking over Israel, okay, Jerusalem. He says that.
O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, city that kills the prophets how often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing.
Okay? So how does this show that God does not always get what he wants? Okay, so he's saying, I desire. Okay, if you look at the Greek, it actually says, I desire to gather you. But you do not have the desire to come. So again, there's things God saying, I want this to happen, but because of your will, this is not happening. Does that make sense? Isaiah 30.
For thus said the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, when you turn and rest, you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength, but you are unbelieving. Verse 18, therefore the Lord relates to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. The Lord is a God of justice, blessed all those who fear him.
Okay. So again, he's saying, he said it, right? I'm waiting. If you just come back. But verse 15 tells us, but you are not willing. Does that make sense? So God's saying, I want you guys to come back. I'm waiting for you guys to come back. But you're not willing to come back. Choice, again. All of these, it shows us God desires something, but he doesn't get what he wants. I'm going to give you a big example in Daniel chapter 10. If you guys can go there, let's all go there together. Okay, let's start from Nicole.
Daniel chapter 10, New International Version. In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belteshazzar. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him.
In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks.
Keep going, one more.
I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth. I ate myself at all for the full 3 weeks.
Okay, so we see clearly in verse 1, Daniel, guy named Daniel, he has a vision, He understands the vision, but later we're going to see that he doesn't understand all of it. He does understand part of it, but we're going to see later how he's actually fasting for 3 weeks, okay? Because he doesn't understand some other parts of it. Does that make sense? All right, let's go to verse 4 through 10.
On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river that is the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist.
Okay, let's skip until 7.
And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision. But a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed. I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep with my face to the ground.
Okay, let's stop right there. Okay? So it seems like probably, if you read the description, probably an angel, some kind of supernatural being, comes, and then he's like shaking, and then he faints. Okay, do you guys see that? Let's read from 10 through 12.
A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them.
Do you see that? So that's why he was praying. He wanted more understanding. Okay, that's why I said that. Okay, so angel comes and says, "Hey, you're esteemed by God. God loves you. I have come to answer your prayer." But you see, he was praying. He was actually fasting for how long? 3 weeks. Okay, now we're gonna see why it took 3 weeks. Okay, let's go to verse 13 and 14. David.
The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the king of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for readiness for days yet to come.
Okay, so he said, if you actually look at verse 12 though, okay, from the first day God sent me, and I was coming, but I was delayed for how long? 21 days, exactly 3 weeks that he was fasting. So if you look at the situation, God actually sent the angel on that first day to answer him. But what happens? Prince of Persia opposes him. Again, this is what we call great controversy. There's something going on in the spiritual realm that actually prevents God's will to happen. And it actually gets delayed. Do you see that? Okay, so only when Michael came, another angel came and helped him, he was able to escape and come answer Daniel's prayer. Okay, so again, these are the unique things about this chapter, and also what we read in Job. Is a lot of times we don't get that. We don't get to see. We don't get a glimpse of the great controversy. But you see, there's a lot of things going on in the background that we just don't know. Does that make sense? So even in this case, I mean, we can't say so again, I'm not saying, we don't want to extrapolate this by saying, well, you see, God didn't answer my prayer because, they were fighting up there. That could be the case, but we don't know that. But at least for Daniel's case, we see that God actually hears his prayer, wants to answer his prayer, but cannot for 3 weeks. Again, all of these things, it tells us what? That God, okay, does not always get what he wants. Now, this is very, very important, okay? This does not mean that God is limited. Sorry, let me say it over. This does not mean that God is not all-powerful. God is all-powerful, but because he gave us free will, he has limited himself in when he interacts with us. But God is still all powerful. Just when he interacts with us, though, he has chosen to give us free will. Therefore, he chooses not to use all of his powers because that would impinge on free will. Right. So again, like a good example would be if I'm talking to like toddlers, and I would, or even if I were to talk about this with high schoolers or junior high kids, I would not use a lot of these language, like vindication. I would not use extrapolate, like these kind of words. Not because I don't know these words, but because they don't understand it. So I choose to limit using some words, but that doesn't mean that I cannot use those words. Does that make sense? Right. So we say this is self-limited. Not God is limited. Like by nature, he's not limited. He's all powerful, of course, but he has chosen not to use these powers. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Okay. So once again, there are definitely Bible verses and stories that seems like, wow, it seems like God is like unilaterally controlling everything. But clearly we see throughout the Bible where God does not always get what he wants. Right? All right. So let's go back to these verses. All right. So once again, the determinists use this verse to say, hey, you see? God determines everything. God wants everything. Okay? But again, to use Nicole's words, that's just one interpretation of it, actually. Another thing is that most of our translations are translated by determinists.
Really?
So they use words. They use words that seem more deterministic as well. Okay, but this one could be very simple. God is Joseph just could be saying, you intended all these evil things to me, but God still brought out goodness. Okay. So again, this verse does not 100% say this is exactly what God wanted. Of course, if you use words like planned, then of course it's going to sound like that. But the Hebrew word doesn't have to be planned. Okay? Even intended, right? You intended all these things, but God still intended to bring goodness out of the situation. Okay? This is a little philosophical argument. I don't think it's the perfect argument, but Joseph actually says he did all these things to save them. Right? But again, an easy thing would be, well, if God is deterministic, why didn't he just give them rain? Okay, that could have been much easier. Right? Of course, their argument though would be, well, this is for God's glory. This is the way for God to show them that he's a loving God, and they would never have known that. But again, the free will argument. But again, this is a philosophical argument going back and forth because we're assuming a lot of these things. But we could say, well, if that's the case, why can't God just program them to know their glory? Why does he have to go through all of these things just to reveal his glory to them? That makes zero sense. Right. Just program the computer so that they know. Yeah. So why it seems obsolete. But again, these are just philosophical arguments, like I said. God can harden man's heart for his glory. How do we understand this? Okay. So this is actually just there's two things I'm going to talk about. But first thing is, this is just the language thing. All right. So if you guys look at this argument here, okay, we would say that the sun melted the ice. And then over here, the sun did what to the clay? Harden the clay. Okay, so we would say that it depends on not the subject meaning this, but it's the object, okay, how it reacts to the subject. Does that make sense? So if this is kind of, it doesn't make sense. This is kind of ironic, but if Pharaoh had a heart of ice, I know, no pun intended, okay, then he would have melted. Okay, but because he had a heart of clay, what God did hardened him. So when God what God talks about in we talked about in verse 7, he's just telling Moses ahead of time what God already knows will happen. He's just predicting that this will happen. Not predicting, he already knows that it's going to happen. Not because he controls everything, but because he just knows time differently than we do. And then that's why we see in chapter 8, actually, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. Okay? So this whole thing is just Pharaoh hardening his own heart. But if he had an heart of ice, then he would have melted. So once again, a lot of these verses, it's not easy, right? But again, it's because if you put on deterministic sunglasses, then you're going to see the whole Bible as deterministic, right? But if you actually take it off and put on free will glasses, then you're able to see that. But again, I'm not saying, well, I like the free will glasses, so I'm going to put it on. But we're saying, no, the argument itself is, it seems like God doesn't always get what he wants. Right? If that's the case, then there has to be, that applies to every single case. Any questions or thoughts? So this is going to be quite important, because tomorrow or whenever we do our next one, we're going to like bring everything together, and now we're going to really get to so what what's the implication of all of this.
Finale. Is that the last one?
Finale will be the next one, last one. But this is one of the reasons why I would disagree with what that person said about, Piper said, what Francis Chan said, or people who say things like, in the end, God still bring good, like in the end, I couldn't have a job or something, I don't want to name it, but, like I went through all these hardships, but in the end, look, something good came to me, right? Again, that's assuming determinism. Yes. So a lot of people who actually believe in free will actually use a lot of statements that actually presupposes determinism. A lot of people actually don't. Yeah. So you have to be very careful how you say some of these things.
Isn't it still possible that like God can do things that he wants as long as it's still possible that God can do things that he wants without infringing on
Yes,
anyone's
absolutely, yeah. Because that's the same thing with us, right? For us, if some of us have more power, we're able to do more things. That doesn't mean that I impinge your will, right? So that's a very good clarification, because there is a difference between free will and free choice, right? People who are more powerful, like God, or a president, or someone who's rich, who have more resources, they have more choices than us. But that doesn't mean that they have more free will than us. Right. For example, if there is a serial killer and straitjacket him, we have eliminated his choices not to kill anymore. But he still has the will to kill, and we can't change that. We can never change that, and that's why we put him in a straitjacket. So this is very important, right? This does not mean that there's things that God does to us, right? That still doesn't mean that he's infringing on our free will, right? Because he just has more. He's just a free agent like us in a free will world. Yeah. So absolutely. There's a lot of things God is doing within this world without infringing on people's free will. Yeah. So God is actually very, very active. Okay, I'll end the stream here. So next one will be the final one. We'll bring everything together, and we'll talk about, okay, where do we go from now? And big question is, well, if big question a lot of people ask is, well, if I cannot, because a lot of people say, I'm gonna look at situation and say this is God, Right? This was God. This is exactly what God wanted, right? But if that's not the case, then how do we actually know what's God's will and what's not God's will? Or what do we trust? And that's what we'll talk about. Next one.